10 years. A decade of marriage. And he couldn't even be on time for the anniversary dinner I'd booked 6 months in advance. When the maître d' finally escorted Ethan to the table. 47 minutes late. I didn't need the strained apology in his eyes to know. It was the cut of his suit, a new, sharper Bryony I hadn't seen. The subtle, unfamiliar citrus note in his cologne overlaying the sandalwood I'd bought him. The way he couldn't quite meet my gaze as he sat. The weight of the world, or at least the weight of his secret, bowing his shoulders. Lila. God. I'm sorry. A last-minute client call, at 8:30 on a Friday. My voice was calm. A flat pane of glass. Which client? Ethan. The Miller acquisition closed Tuesday. The Davidson settlement is next month. You have no active cases requiring Friday night fire drills. He flinched. A tiny tick near his eye. The waiter descended. A merciful interruption. We ordered by rote. The tasting menu. The 2015 Dom Perignon I'd pre-selected. The performance of normalcy. The champagne arrived, bubbling with false cheer. He raised his glass. To 10 years. I didn't lift mine. Let's not. The silence that fell between us was a physical thing. Dense and cold. It swallowed the genteel clatter of the restaurant. The murmur of other conversations about stock portfolios and Hamptons rentals. I waited. I had become very good at waiting. He set his glass down. Untouched. Ran a hand through hair that was still thick. Still unfairly golden. My handsome husband. Ethan Prescott. Partner at Harwood Klein. Member of the Yale Club. Owner of a pre-war on the Upper East Side and a soul that had, it seemed, begun to rot from the inside out. Lila. He started. Stopped. Swallowed. There's something I have to tell you. I'm listening. It's about my new assistant. Sophie. Sophie. The name was a dart. Slick and sharp. 24. Auburn hair that fell in artful waves. A laugh that was a little too loud for the office corridor. She'd started at Harwood Klein 6 months ago. I'd met her once. At the firm's summer gala. She'd worn a red dress that clung and sparkled. And her hand, when I shook it, was cool and confident. Mrs. Prescott. Such an honor. Ethan talks about you all the time. Her eyes, a clear, guileless green, had slid past me to where Ethan stood, already pulling her into his orbit. What about her? I asked. My tone that of a wife inquiring about a problematic employee. We've. He took a sharp breath. The words tumbling out now, pushed by guilt or a desperate need for absolution. It started about 5 months ago. After the Daniels win. We were working late. Celebrating, it just happened. But it wasn't just, it's not just physical. I felt a distant, clinical curiosity. What is it? Then. It's real. The word was a blasphemy in this temple of our shared life. She understands me. The pressure. The drive. It's different with her. Lively. New. I see. I took a small sip of water. The ice was gone. It was tepid. Duration. What? How long has this real connection been going on? Ethan. You said it started 5 months ago. Has it been continuous? He looked baffled. As if I'd asked for a spreadsheet. Yes. More or less. Frequency of contact. Outside of the office. Lila. For God's sake, how often? Ethan. A few times a week. He muttered. Staring at the tablecloth. You have a key to her apartment. Or is it a hotel? His head jerked up. How did you? The credit card statement. Ethan. The one I still have access to. The recurring weekly charge at the Lowell. And before you lie. The concierge there knows me. I had lunch with Camilla Aestir in the Pembroke room last month. He asked if Mr. Prescott was enjoying the suite for his extended client meetings. I let that hang. The color drained from his face. A slow leak. So. An apartment and a hotel. You're covering all bases. What's the address? The apartment. 78 Teach. Between Park and Lex. The words were a whisper. A nice building. Newly renovated. Not cheap. You're on the lease. A nod. Almost imperceptible. And the jewelry. The Van Cleef bracelet last month. The Cartier watch before that. Client gifts. You said. For the Davidson settlement. He was crumbling now. The polished facade cracking to reveal the weak mortar beneath. She makes me feel young. Lila. You and I. We've gotten so comfortable. It's all about the gallery. Your design clients. The charity boards. With Sophie. It's fun. It's spontaneous. Spontaneous. With my husband's money. The anger arrived then. Not as a fire. But as a deep, glacial cold that spread from my core to my fingertips. I welcomed it. It was better than the shattering pain waiting beneath. Define fun. I said. My voice still eerily calm. Besides the obvious. Does she ski? Does she like the theater? Or is the fun primarily transactional? Shopping trips. Spa days. How much? Ethan. In total. He named a figure. It was obscene. It was more than the down payment on our first apartment. It was a number that could have funded my design studio for 2 years. It was a number that meant this was not a midlife crisis fling. It was an investment. The first course arrived, a delicate fluke crudo with sea beans and yuzu. It looked like art. It tasted like ash. We ate in silence for a moment. The exquisite food a mockery. What do you want, Ethan? I finally asked, setting my fork down. He looked up, a flicker of hope in his bloodshot eyes. I want to do the right thing. But I can't. I can't stop seeing her. I think I might be in love with her. There it was. The kill shot. Delivered not with malice, but with the bumbling, selfish honesty of a child confessing he'd broken a vase. I might be in love with her. 10 years of shared history. Of whispered dreams in the dark. Of holding his hand through his father's funeral. Of building a life, reduced to a might be. The glacial cold hardened into diamond. Sharp. Impenetrable. Useful. I see. I said again. I folded my napkin. A precise, deliberate motion. Then I believe we are at an impasse. You are, as they say, in love. I am, apparently, comfortable. This is not a sustainable model for a marriage. Lila. I'm so sorry. Sorry is a sentiment. It is not a solution. I leaned forward, lowering my voice. The couple at the next table was pretending not to listen. This is what is going to happen. We will get a divorce. It will be quiet. And it will be quick. No dragging our names through the tabloids. No embarrassing scenes at the Yale Club. We will tell our families, and our closest friends, that we grew apart. An amicable separation. You will cite irreconcilable differences. I will not contest it. He stared at me, shock wiping his face blank. This wasn't the script. There should have been tears. Screaming. Thrown wine. A public spectacle. This was calm. Rational. And utterly terrifying in its efficiency. You agree. Just like that. I agree that the marriage is over. The man I married would not have done this. The man sitting across from me is a stranger. I do not fight for strangers. I paused, letting the truth of that sink in for both of us. But there are conditions. Anything. The word burst from him. Eager. Relieved. He thought he was getting off easy. Poor. Sweet. Comfortable Lila. Rolling over. My heart. That traitorous organ. Gave one final, agonizing squeeze and went still. First, I said, ticking points off on my chilled fingers. You will move out. Tonight. You can go to the Lowell. I'm sure the suite is available. You will take only your clothes and personal effects from the study. Everything else stays. The apartment. The art. The furniture. It's mine pending the settlement. But, second. I overrode him. You will retain David Rothstein as your attorney. I will retain Meredith Thorne. His eyes widened. Meredith Thorne was a shark in a Chanel suit. Known in Manhattan divorce circles as the Widowmaker. You will instruct Rothstein to cooperate for a swift, no-fault, uncontested divorce. You will accept the financial terms my attorney presents, provided they are within reason. Lila. The firm. My partnership, a messy divorce, precisely why we are doing it this way. To protect your precious reputation. And mine. Third. You will not bring her, Sophie, to any social function, any restaurant, any venue where we might cross paths for the next 6 months. You will be discreet. If I hear so much as a whisper of you two at Cipriani or the Boom Boom Room, all bets are off. I will file for adultery, alienation of affection, and take you for every cent you have. I will send the evidence to page 6 myself. Do you understand? He nodded. A jerky, marionette motion. Yes. Yes. Of course. Discretion. Thank you. Lila. This is more than I deserve. That, I said, standing up, is the first true thing you've said all night. I looked down at him, at the handsome, weak man I had loved. The glacial diamond in my chest glittered. The dinner is paid for. Enjoy the rest of your meal. I'd recommend the venison. It's supposed to be exquisite, just like everything else you've thrown away. I didn't look back as I walked out of the restaurant. I held my head high, my spine straight, a smile gracing my lips for the benefit of the Maître d', the other diners, the watching world, the performance of the gracious, unbroken woman. The cold night air of West 51st Street hit me like a slap. My Uber was 2 minutes away. I stood on the curb, perfectly still, as the city, chaotic light and sounds swirled around me. Then, and only then, in the anonymous dark of the waiting car, did I pull out my phone. A single notification glowed on the screen. An encrypted message app I'd installed 3 months ago, when the late nights had become too frequent, the new cologne too pungent, the distance in his eyes too profound. The message was from a contact listed as PI. It contained no text, only 3 file attachments, downloaded and saved locally. I tapped the first. It was a series of photos. Ethan and Sophie, leaving a building on 78th Street, his hand on the small of her back. Ethan and Sophie, laughing in a dim corner of the Lambs Club. Ethan, entering the Lowell, alone, at 3:15 p.m. on a Tuesday. The second file was a PDF, bank statements, transfers from a business account I didn't recognize, Prescott Holdings LLC, to a checking account under the name Sophie Mercer. Regular, sizable deposits, rent payments to a management company, credit card bills from Bergdorf Goodman, La Perla, Harry Winston. The third file was the one I opened last. It was a comprehensive report. Background, employment history, family, education, and the final section, the one I'd specifically requested and paid a substantial bonus for, marked confidential medical search. My finger hovered over the screen. The Uber turned onto 5th Avenue. The lights of the park a dark blur. I didn't open it. Not yet. I didn't need to see the details. I just needed to know I had them. I typed a quick reply, payment transferred. Stand by for phase 2. The response was immediate, acknowledged. Ready when you are. I leaned my head against the cool window, watching the glittering fortress of our apartment building draw near. The home we'd bought together. The life we'd built. The future we'd planned. It's over, I thought. But as the car pulled under the awning, as the doorman, Carlos, stepped forward with his usual warm smile, another thought, colder and far more purposeful, crystallized in the diamond-hard center of my being. It's just beginning. The silence in the apartment was a new kind of sound. It wasn't the peaceful quiet of a shared space when one person is reading and the other is dozing. It was the hollow, resonant silence of abandonment. A museum after hours. Ethan's departure had been swift and surgical, just as I dictated. 2 suitcases, a garment bag, and the box of personal papers from his locked desk drawer. The click of the front door closing behind him at 1:17 a.m. had been the period at the end of our sentence. I didn't sleep. I moved through the rooms like a curator, assessing the collection of our life. The Scandinavian sofa we'd saved for, bought at the DD Building showroom. The brutalist-inspired coffee table he'd hated but I'd loved. The gallery wall of black and white photos from trips to Porto, Kyoto, Patagonia. My face ached from the frozen, public smile. I let it fall, feeling the muscles twitch in relief. In the floor-to-ceiling window, my reflection was a pale ghost floating in a sea of dark park and city light. Amicable. The word tasted like bile. Grew apart. The convenient lie of the privileged. We hadn't grown apart. He had walked away, hand in hand with a girl whose entire wardrobe likely cost less than one of my handbags. The cold anger was still there, a steady, humming core inside me, but it had shape now, purpose. It was no longer an emotion, it was a tool. At 6:00 a.m., I showered, dressed in a simple but immaculate cream-colored Acris pantsuit, and made a single cup of pour-over coffee. I drank it standing at the kitchen island, the same spot where Ethan used to gulp his down while scrolling through the journal. The routine was the same. The universe within this apartment was not. I was the last sentient being in a suddenly alien world. I had maps, though. The files on my phone. My first call was at 8:30 a.m. sharp. Meredith Thorne's office on Park Avenue. Meredith Thorne's office. A crisply efficient voice answered. Lila Prescott for Ms. Thorne. She's expecting me. A brief hold. Then a different voice. Lower. Smoother. Devoid of unnecessary warmth. Lila. Meredith. I've cleared my next hour. Come up. Meredith Thorne was a lesson in controlled power. In her late 50s, she had the sharp, elegant bones of a falcon and eyes that missed nothing. Her office was a study in minimalist intimidation, bleached oak, steel, a stunning Lee Krasner painting the only explosion of color. There were no family photos. The only personal item was a heavy, vintage fountain pen on the pristine desk. She didn't offer coffee. Sit, she said, gesturing to a chair that was more sculpture than furniture. It was uncomfortable on purpose. Ethan Prescott. Harwood Klein. You've been married 10 years. No children. He's had an affair with his assistant, Sophie Mercer. You want a divorce. You want it fast. And you want it quiet. Correct. I nodded, settling into the chair. Back straight. Substantially correct. I want it to appear fast and quiet. I want the public narrative to be an amicable, no-fault dissolution. Irreconcilable differences. A clean break. Meredith's eyes, the color of flint, narrowed a fraction. But I do not want a clean break financially. I want an unclean, thorough, and maximally advantageous break. I want the process to be a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. Publicly, we are the sad, civilized couple. Legally, I want you to eviscerate him. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a master surgeon presented with an interesting tumor. I despise the term fair in divorce proceedings. It's meaningless. My job is to get you what the law allows. And what leverage can secure. Leverage is preferable. You have evidence of the affair. I placed a manila envelope on her desk. It contained printed copies of the least intrusive photos, them entering buildings together. The time-stamped hotel lobby shots. It contained the bank transfer records showing the payments to Sophie. It did not contain the medical file. Meredith scanned them, her expression unchanged. Adultery is a factor in New York. But it's not the golden ticket people think. It can influence equitable distribution, especially if marital funds were used to support the paramour. She tapped the bank statements. These are good. Very good. This LLC. Prescott Holdings. You're aware of it? No. It appears to be a shell he's been using to funnel money. Possibly firm money. Definitely money I didn't know about. Her eyes gleamed. Hidden assets. Even better. Dissipation of marital assets for a non-marital purpose. Excellent. She made a note on a pristine legal pad with that vicious pen. Your instructions are for him to use David Rothstein. Smart. David is competent. Lazy. And hates mess. He'll push for a quick settlement to avoid discovery. We can use that. She looked up at me. What is your desired outcome? The apartment. The apartment is a start. It's in both names. But the mortgage is paid from our joint account, to which I've contributed significantly from my design business. I want it free and clear. I also want the full value of his partnership interest at Harwood Klein. Not just the base share, but the projected earnings for the next 3 years. He's on track for senior partner. I want a percentage of that future value. Meredith was writing quickly now. Ambitious. The firm will fight that. They have partnership agreements designed to shield from exactly this. Then we leverage the threat of scandal. A messy divorce involving hidden LLCs and misuse of funds. The state partners at Harwood Klein would pay to make that go away. Ethan would pay more. What else? All investment accounts. The 401k. The managed portfolio at Goldman. The private equity holdings. A 70-30 split. In my favor. 70-30 is aggressive. The standard with your length of marriage. No children. And both parties being high earners would trend towards 60-40. Maybe even 55-45. I'm not a high earner compared to him. My business is successful. But it's not seven-figure partner successful. And I have evidence of fault. Aggressive is the starting point. I also want the house in Southampton. Not the Palm Beach one. He likes that one too much. Southampton. Meredith leaned back. Assessing me. You've done your homework. I've had time to think. Alimony. Maintenance. Lump sum. I don't want a monthly check from him for the next decade. I want a clean financial break. Once the money is in my account. A single, large, painful transfer that ends all future obligations. That will be a larger number. I know. She was silent for a long moment. You understand, Lila, that to get this, to have a chance at this, we cannot just threaten. We will have to be prepared to litigate, to dig, and to drag things into the light. The very things you want to avoid publicly. I know. The threat must be credible. The dossier must be so damning that to fight it would be financial and reputational suicide. I want him to look at the prospect of a court battle and see only an abyss. I want him to beg to settle on my terms. And the girlfriend. Sophie. She said the name like it was a mildly unpleasant species of insect. She is a tool. A means to an end. Her existence proves the affair. Her financial dependency proves the dissipation. Her background may provide additional pressure points. I kept my voice level. But the target is Ethan. His career. His reputation. His money. She is a symptom. He is the disease. Meredith gave a slow, approving nod. Good. Sentiment towards the other woman is a waste of energy. Focus on the spouse. Always. She slid the envelope back to me. Keep these. I'll have my team start the financial forensics. We'll subpoena records for Prescott Holdings. Trace every dollar. We'll also need a full accounting of your own finances. Your business valuation. We'll file the petition for divorce on the grounds of adultery. That's the public stick. Simultaneously, we'll have Rothstein served with an offer of settlement based on irreconcilable differences, the quiet, amicable deal. The offer will be generous by normal standards, but far less than what we will ask for in court. He'll see the gap. He'll feel the pressure. How long? If he's as scared as you think. 3 months. Maybe 4. If he's stubborn. A year. But every day of litigation will cost him more. In legal fees and in exposure. We'll make sure he knows that. She stood, signaling the end of the meeting. You're handling this correctly, Lila. Emotion is a luxury in these situations. A liability. You've removed the luxury. I stood as well. It wasn't a luxury I could afford. She walked me to the door. One question. The speed. The precision. This isn't just about the money. Is it? I met her flinty gaze. What else would it be about? It's about the story, she said, her voice low. He's written the first draft of the story. The powerful man. The young mistress. The comfortable wife left behind. You're rewriting it. You're not going to be the victim in the narrative. You're going to be the silent partner who walks away with the keys to the kingdom. That's a better story. I didn't answer. I just gave her a slight, icy smile of my own and walked out. The next call was harder. My mother, Eleanor, in Greenwich. The landline rang in the sun-drenched kitchen of my childhood home. A place that smelled perpetually of lemon polish and gardenias. Lila, darling, I was just thinking of you. How was the anniversary dinner? Did Ethan love the watch? Her voice, so full of warm anticipation, was a physical blow. I clenched the phone. Mom, it's over. Ethan and I. We're getting a divorce. The silence on the other end was profound. Then, a sharp intake of breath. What? Lila. No. What happened? Did you have a fight? Every marriage has rough patches. Sweetheart. Your father and I, he's having an affair. Mom. With his 24-year-old assistant. It's been going on for months. Another silence. This one was colder. I could picture her. Perfectly coiffed. Sitting at the breakfast nook. The world reordering itself unpleasantly around this new, sordid information. I see. The warmth was gone. Replaced by a socialite's crisp assessment of damage. How unfortunate. And vulgar. An assistant. The word was a slur. What are your plans? I've retained Meredith Thorne. A pause. Meredith's reputation preceded her. Strong choice. Your father won't like it. He plays golf with Ethan's senior partner, Arthur Harwood. I'm sure Arthur Harwood will be more concerned with the fact that Ethan has been funneling firm money through a shell company to pay for his mistress's apartment and jewelry. That tends to sour a golfing partnership. My mother was silent for so long I thought the line had gone dead. I see. She said again. And now her voice held a new note. A hint of grim respect. You have evidence. I do. And you're sure. About this path. It will be ugly. Lila. The people we know, they'll take sides. There will be talk. There's already talk. Mom. Or there will be. I'd rather the talk be about how efficiently I handled it. Rather than how pitiful I looked when he left. She sighed. A world-weary sound. You're my daughter. Of course we support you. Your father will be disappointed in Ethan. But he'll do what's necessary. Do you need to come home? For a few days. The offer. So rare from my emotionally reserved mother. Almost undid me. Almost. No. Thank you. I need to be here. To manage this. Very well. Another pause. Lila, you all right? The directness of the question surprised me. I'm functional. I said. Which was the truth. Good. Being functional is the first step. Call if you need anything. She hung up. The conversation too fraught with unspoken things, her own quiet disappointments. The pressure to maintain appearances. The unspoken rule that women of our class endured certain things with a stiff upper lip. I had chosen not to endure. I had chosen war. I think. In her own way. She understood. The following days were a blur of grim activity. I met with my business manager. Separating joint accounts. Securing my lines of credit. I changed the locks on the apartment. I had a security system installed that Ethan's codes would not work on. I packed the few personal items he'd left behind in a box and had Carlos ship it to his office. Each action was a brick in a wall I was building between my old life and whatever came next. I also began my own parallel investigation. Separate from Meredith's legal team. The private investigator. A gruff, efficient man named Roy who billed exorbitantly and delivered flawless results. Was on retainer. What do you need, Mrs. Prescott? He'd asked over a secure line. Everything on Sophie Mercer. Not just the basics. I want to know her favorite coffee order. Her workout schedule. Who her friends are. Where her family gets their hair cut. I want to know if she's ever so much as littered. And I want to know about her health. Medical history. Everything. Medical is tricky. HIPAA laws are tight. I'm aware. Find a way. Background checks for employment sometimes require waivers. See if she signed one for Harwood Klein. Check with the temp agency she worked for before. Look for paper trails. Old insurance forms. Be creative. Understood. While Roy dug, I dove into the digital paper trail myself. Ethan was smart. But he was arrogant. He'd gotten sloppy. Believing I was too trusting. Too wrapped up in my fabric swatches and client presentations to notice. The LLC, Prescott Holdings, was a masterpiece of casual fraud. It was registered in Delaware. Listed as a consulting firm. Its bank statements showed regular, sizable deposits from what appeared to be a sub-account of Harwood Klein's client escrow fund. The memos read Client Development, S. Mercer or Research Services. The withdrawals were equally regular. Rent for the apartment on 78 Th Street. Payments to Saks. To a luxury travel agency. To a doctor's office on the Upper East Side. Doctor's office. I circled it. It was a practice known for concierge medicine and discreet, cash-based services. Not the kind of place a healthy 24-year-old goes for a checkup. One evening, a week after the confession, I was deep in a spreadsheet tracing the LLC's flow of funds when my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a text appeared from the same number. Lila. It's Ethan. We need to talk. Please. I stared at the words. The please was new. The begging tone. I waited an hour. Then texted back, all communication through attorneys now. His response was immediate. It's not about the divorce. It's about us. Can I come by? Just to talk. No. I typed. There is no us to talk about. I made a mistake. A terrible, terrible mistake. It's over with, Sophie. I ended it. I almost laughed. The speed of it. The cowardice. The affair hadn't ended because of a moral epiphany. It had ended because I'd raised the cost. I didn't respond. Another text. Lila. Please. I'm miserable. I'm staying at the Yale Club. It's awful. I miss you. I miss our life. This time. I picked up the phone and called. He answered on the first ring. His voice ragged with hope. Lila. Thank God. Ethan. Listen to me very carefully. I said. My voice flat and clear in the silent apartment. Do not contact me again unless it is through Meredith Thorne or David Rothstein. I am not your therapist. I am not your confessor. I am not your friend. The next time you text or call this number, I will consider it harassment and file for a restraining order. Do you understand? The silence on the other end was thick with shock. I'd never spoken to him like that. Not in 10 years. You can't be serious. Lila. It's me. I know exactly who you are. I said softly. Goodbye. Ethan. I hung up and blocked the number. My hand was perfectly steady. The diamond inside me glittered. Cold and bright. A few days later, Roy delivered the second package. It was thicker than the first. I opened it after dark, spreading the contents on my clean, empty dining table. There were photos of Sophie. Many photos. Leaving a SoulCycle class with a girlfriend. Laughing. Carrying a shopping bag from the row. Meeting a woman who looked like an older version of herself, her mother. Presumably, for lunch at a cozy-looking Italian place in the village. She was pretty. In a carefully curated, Instagram-ready way. Her smile in the photos with her friend was easy. With her mother, it looked strained. The written report was exhaustive. Sophie Mercer, 24. Born in Poughkeepsie, New York. Father, Robert Mercer. Mid-level manager at a HVAC supplier. Mother, Linda Mercer. Part-time receptionist at a dental office. One younger brother. Enlisted in the Army. State school degree in communications. Worked as a receptionist at a tech startup. Then a temp at a fashion PR firm. Then landed the assistant job at Harvard Klein. Credit score, mediocre. Debt, significant student loans. Credit card balances. Ambitions, according to a paid friend. She wanted to marry well and never have to look at a price tag again. She was, the report noted dryly, strategic in her romantic attachments. The boyfriend before Ethan was a hedge fund analyst whose father owned a chain of car dealerships. That had ended when the boyfriend's family made it clear she wasn't suitable. Then, the final page. The medical section. Roy had attached a note, hard to get. Friend of a friend at a billing processing company used by the clinic. Not 100% official. But data matches. It wasn't a full medical record. It was a billing summary. A list of procedures and diagnostic codes. Office visits. Lab work. Genetic counseling sessions. Prescription records. And there it was. The code. The one I'd had Roy specifically look for. A desperate hunch based on a half-remembered detail from a magazine article about a client's sister. A code for a specific genetic test. A test for the HT gene. Huntington's disease. My breath caught. It wasn't a diagnosis. Not yet. The test could be predictive. For someone with a family history. The billing summary showed repeated visits to a neurologist, prescriptions for medications used to manage anxiety, depression, mood swings, common early symptoms, or the psychological burden of being at risk. I leaned back, the expensive paper crisp under my fingers. Pieces clicked into place with an almost audible snap. The urgency, the need for security, for a financial life raft, a young woman with a possible death sentence hanging over her head, from a modest background with no safety net. Ethan wasn't just an affair. He was a plan. A handsome, wealthy, emotionally vulnerable plan. A wave of something dark and ugly washed over me. Not pity. Not for her. It was a profound, chilling understanding. This wasn't a story about love or lust. It was a story about survival. Her survival. And now, it was about mine. I thought of Ethan. Ethan, who valued appearance above all else. Ethan, who feared illness, decay, dependency, who had panicked when my father had a cancer scare, asking me incessantly if it was hereditary. Ethan, with his perfect hair and his perfect life, tying himself to a time bomb wrapped in a red dress. He didn't know. He couldn't know. She would never have told him. To reveal that would be to risk the golden goose flying away. She needed the ring on her finger, the shared assets, the legal commitment. Before the first tremor, the first sign of chorea, manifested, the coldness in me intensified, crystallizing into a plan so clear, so perfect. It felt like destiny. Meredith's legal leverage was the stick. This was the scalpel. The one that would cut to the very heart of his cowardice and vanity. My phone buzzed. A calendar alert. Meeting with Meredith Thorne. Draft settlement discussion, 10 a.m. I looked at the billing summary one more time, then carefully placed it back in the envelope. I didn't need to bring it to Meredith. Not yet. Some weapons were too precise, too potent, to be unsheathed too early. They were for the final, intimate strike. When the enemy thought the battle was only about money and reputation. I knew what I had to do. I needed the original document. The official report. Something tangible. Undeniable. The billing summary was a shadow. I needed the substance. I went to my laptop and composed an email to Roy. My fingers steady on the keys. Roy, new priority. I need physical copies of specific medical records from the clinic on the billing summary. Full genetic test results and any associated neurological evaluations for Sophie Mercer. Discretion is absolute. Budget is no object. Let me know what you need to make it happen. I hit send. The deed was in motion. Outside, the city glittered, indifferent and vast. In my silent apartment, I was no longer the curator of a dead life. I was the architect of a reckoning. The paper trail wasn't just a path to a financial settlement. It was a trail of breadcrumbs leading to the very core of the betrayal. And I would follow it, without mercy and without a sound, until I held in my hands the one piece of paper that would break the man who had broken me. The genetic test was the key. But a key is useless without a door. The door, in this case, was Sophie Mercer herself. I needed proximity, context, the human texture behind the sterile medical codes. Roy's report was a dossier. I needed a novel. Her novel. I needed to know her fears, her routines, her unguarded moments. I needed to become a ghost in her life, a silent witness to the performance she was staging for my husband, and for herself. It started with observation, passive. At first, I knew her address. The building on 78th Street was a sleek, new construction glass and steel affair, out of place among the older limestone and brick. Security, a doorman, keycard access, cameras, not impenetrable. But a direct approach was out of the question. I didn't need to get inside. Not yet. I needed to see the pattern of her life. For a week, I became a fixture in the neighborhood. My alibi was plausible. I was a designer, scouting locations, meeting with fabric wholesalers on the Upper East Side. I wore large sunglasses, pulled my hair into a low ponytail, dressed in nondescript but expensive athleisure wear, the uniform of 1,000 wealthy neighborhood women. I carried a tote bag heavy with fabric samples and blueprints. I sat in a coffee shop 2 blocks down with a direct sightline to her building's entrance. I read design magazines on my tablet. The camera app open. Set to video. Her schedule was predictable. A young woman playing at being a kept woman with purpose. Mornings. Around 8:15. She emerged. Always immaculate. Her style was a careful, studied blend of sexy and sophisticated, tight-fitting theory trousers. Silk blouses with one too many buttons undone. Towering heels. She navigated with the confidence of a born New Yorker. She worked. That much was clear. She went to an office. But the hours were flexible. She'd leave Harwood Klein. According to the building's public directory I'd checked. At odd times, 3 p.m. on a Tuesday, 1 p.m. on a Thursday. Sometimes she'd return to her apartment. Sometimes she'd meet a friend, the same one from Roy's photos. A bubbly blonde named Chloe. They'd go to overpriced juice bars, boutique fitness studios, or shop. One Tuesday, she met her mother. I saw them from my perch. Linda Mercer was a faded version of her daughter. Her clothes slightly dated. Her posture defensive. They met at a small, quiet French bistro. I took a table at the back, behind a potted fern. I couldn't hear everything. But the tone was clear, tension, laced with a desperate, anxious affection. Just want you to be careful, Sophie, Linda was saying. Her voice a low, worried hum. This man, Ethan, he's married. It's not right. Mom, please, not now. Everything is under control. Sophie's voice was smooth, practiced, a rehearsed line. She stirred her cappuccino, not meeting her mother's eyes. Is it? You're still going to the doctor? Sophie's head snapped up. Keep your voice down. She glanced around, her gaze sweeping past my hidden table. Yes, I'm fine. It's just monitoring. Like I told you. And you told him. This Ethan. A brittle, humorless laugh. God. No. Are you kidding? That's not part of the plan. Mom. The plan is security. Stability. Before anything might change. Lying to him isn't the way to start a life. Honey. I'm not lying. I'm just not volunteering information that's none of his business yet. Sophie's voice hardened. You don't understand the pressure. The clock. I need this to work. I deserve a little security after everything. Don't I? Her mother reached across the table, patting her hand. A gesture that was both loving and hopeless. Of course you do, baby. I just worry. Don't. Worry is a luxury I can't afford. Sophie pulled her hand back, signaling the end of the discussion. Now, tell me about Dad's bowling league. I left cash on the table and slipped out, my heart hammering a cold, rhythmic beat against my ribs. The clock. Before anything might change. It wasn't proof, but it was confirmation. The genetic spectre was real. And it was the engine of her ambition. She wasn't just a gold digger. She was a refugee, seeking higher ground before the flood. Understanding that didn't soften me toward her. It just made her more dangerous. And her manipulation of Ethan more calculated. It also gave me a timeline. She was in a hurry. My own timeline accelerated a few days later. Meredith's team had made progress. The financial forensics were a thing of dark beauty. They traced the LLC's funds not just to Harwood Klein's escrow account, but to 2 specific client retainers. Ethan had been creatively reallocating client money, a breach of ethics that bordered on, and often crossed into, illegality. It was a powder keg under his partnership. Meredith had drafted the divorce petition. It was a masterpiece of legal aggression, citing adultery, dissipation of marital assets, and emotional cruelty. The attached settlement offer, the amicable one, was generous enough to look reasonable, but it demanded the apartment, 60% of all liquid assets, and a sizable lump sum alimony payment. We serve him with this, Meredith said, sliding the papers across her desk to me. The petition and the offer simultaneously. He'll see the abyss. Then, we wait. Rothstein will call. Sputtering. We'll negotiate from a position of absolute strength. When? I asked. My voice calm. Tomorrow. My process server will deliver it to his office. Let his colleagues see it. Let the whisper network start. Good. I felt a thrill. Sharp and cold. The first move in the open war. There's something else. I may have additional leverage soon. Of a more personal nature. Meredith's eyebrow arched. Personal how? Medical. Regarding the girlfriend. She leaned forward. Her fingers steepled. Be very careful. Lila. HIPAA violations are federal crimes. Obtaining medical records improperly is a quicksand that can swallow your entire case. And possibly land you in jail. It's not worth it. I'm not obtaining them improperly, I said, which was a lie so smooth it felt like truth. Let's just say I'm aware of a pre-existing health condition that significantly impacts her long-term viability and Ethan's perception of her. Meredith studied me for a long moment. I don't want to know the details. If you have information, and it comes to you through a legally permissible channel, say, if she were to volunteer it in a moment of distress, or if it were a matter of public record in some way, then that information can be used strategically. But it must be clean. My advice: let the financial and adultery charges do the work. They are more than enough. Sometimes enough isn't enough. I said softly. Her flinty eyes held mine. Vengeance is a dish best served cold. Lila. But if you microwave it, you'll burn yourself. I left her office. The metaphor lingering. I wasn't planning to microwave anything. I was planning a surgical strike. And for that, I needed to be inside the operating room. I needed to be in Sophie's apartment. Roy, for all his skills, couldn't get me the actual medical file. The clinic was a fortress. But he'd provided the next best thing, a blueprint. He'd cased the building on 78 Teach. The doorman, Miguel, was a family man, working a double shift to pay for his daughter's orthodontic. He was friendly, chatty, and, according to Roy's discreet inquiries, not above accepting the occasional gratuity to look the other way for deliveries or guests of attractive female tenants. The superintendent, a man named Oleg with a thick Eastern European accent and a fondness for bourbon, was the key. He had a master keycard and access to all units for maintenance. He also, Roy discovered, had a side business selling prescription painkillers, sourced from a cousin who was a pharmacist in Queens. He was careful, but he was greedy. Here's the way in, Roy said over the phone, his voice a low rumble. But it's risky. If you're caught, it's breaking and entering. Felony. I won't be caught, I said, the diamond core of certainty in my chest unwavering. Set up a meeting. A consultation. I have a design problem in a rental property I own. I need a discreet handyman who can be available after hours. The meeting was in a diner on 2nd Avenue. Oleg was in his 50s, with thick hands and wary eyes. He smelled of cigarette smoke and sawdust. I was Lillian Price, a property owner with a troublesome tenant. I wore a wig, glasses, and no makeup. I have a tenant, I said, my voice pitched higher, tinged with a vague Midwestern accent. A young woman. She's behind on rent. I have cause to evict, but I need to document the state of the apartment. She's subletting illegally. I'm sure of it. I just need 5 minutes inside to take a few pictures. When she's at work, no one gets hurt. No property damage. $1,000. Cash. For 15 minutes of your time with a keycard. Oleg stirred his coffee. His eyes narrowed. 1,000 for 5 minutes. What you really looking for? You a private eye. Jealous wife. I'm a landlord who wants her property back, I said evenly, sliding an envelope across the table. It contained $500 bills. This is a down payment. Another 1,000 when the job is done. And I never saw you. You never saw me. He eyed the money. Then me. The greed one. Which building? I gave him the address on 78 Teach. His face went still. That's a nice building. Good security. Which is why I need you. Next Tuesday. The tenant has a regular physical therapy appointment from 2 to 3 p.m. She's never late. You let me in at 2:05. I'm out by 2:20. You're in the hallway, fixing a leaky faucet in the vacant unit across the hall. If anyone comes. You cough. Loudly. He thought about it. His fingers tapping the envelope. 3,000. Total. Cash. Upfront on the day. 2,000 total. Half now. Half then. That's my final offer. Or I find someone else who appreciates easy money. I made to take the envelope back. His hand closed over it. Deal. Tuesday. 2:05. You be quick. And quiet. Always. The days until Tuesday were a slow-burning fuse. Ethan was served at his office. The fallout was immediate and gratifying. My phone, though his number was blocked, lit up with calls from numbers I didn't recognize, likely his colleagues. Mutual friends trying to mediate. I let them all go to voicemail. Meredith reported that David Rothstein had called. His voice tight with strained professionalism. My client is, understandably, distressed by the allegations in the petition. Meredith. The financial claims are outrageous. And the adultery claim is needlessly inflammatory. We were under the impression this would be a civil, no-fault proceeding. My client was under the impression her husband would be faithful. Meredith had replied coolly. We're all dealing with disappointment. David. The settlement offer is attached. My client is willing to be civil. The numbers reflect that civility. But the clock is ticking. Every day we don't have a signed agreement is a day closer to me filing a motion for immediate discovery on the Prescott Holdings LLC and its connection to Harwood Klein's client escrow accounts. I'm sure Ethan's partners would find that discovery process enlightening. There was a long silence on the other end. I'll confer with my client, Rothstein had said, and hung up. The war was joined. Tuesday arrived. A dull, grey day that matched my nerves. I dressed for the part, dark jeans, a black turtleneck, black sneakers. I wore a dark baseball cap and kept the wig, a short, brown bob, in my bag. I carried a large, soft-sided tote that held a slim digital camera, a pair of thin latex gloves, and a small, powerful flashlight. I also had a handful of folded fabric swatches, my cover if I was stopped. A designer, looking for a client who wasn't home. At 1:55 p.m., I was in the service alley behind the building on 78 Th. At 2:02, the service door buzzed open. Oleg, in a maintenance uniform, jerked his head for me to follow. We took the service elevator to the 12th floor. The hallway was empty. Quiet. Plush with new carpet. 12B. He muttered, swiping a keycard. A soft click. 15 minutes. I'll be at 12A. Tap the door twice when you leave. Don't touch anything you don't have to. I nodded, pulled on the gloves, and slipped inside. Sophie's apartment smelled of vanilla-scented candles and new money. It was a one-bedroom, decorated in the generic upscale style of a luxury rental, grey L-shaped sofa, glass coffee table, a large TV mounted on the wall. But her touches were everywhere. Throw pillows in garish animal prints. A stack of coffee table books about fashion and travel, likely unread. A cluster of framed photos on a console table, Sophie with her friend Chloe. Sophie with her parents at what looked like a county fair. Sophie on a beach, laughing. None of Ethan. Not yet. She was smarter than that. I moved quickly, methodically. The living area yielded nothing. The kitchen was clean. Showroom clean. The refrigerator held expensive sparkling water. Pre-made salads from Dean DeLuca. A bottle of champagne. The bathroom was a temple to upkeep. La Mer creams. Orib hair products. A medicine cabinet filled with the usual array of supplements. Allergy meds. Sleeping pills. And there, tucked behind a bottle of Advil, the prescription bottles. Sertraline. An anti-anxiety medication. Clonazepam. For occasional use. Both in her name. Both from a psychiatrist whose name I recognized from the billing summary. My heart beat a steady, hard rhythm. I took photos of everything with the silent digital camera. The living room. The photos. The medicine cabinet. Proof of occupancy. Of a lifestyle funded by my husband. Then, the bedroom. It was dominated by a large, upholstered bed. Unmade. The sheets a tangled mess of high thread count white linen. The sight of it, The intimacy of the rumpled sheets sent a bolt of pure, undiluted rage through me. I forced it down, forced my breath to even out. This was not the time. Her closet was a walk-in, bursting with clothes, many with tags still on, shoes lined up in obsessive rows, handbags on shelves. I scanned them, looking for a safe, a lockbox, a filing cabinet. Nothing. Her desk was a small, feminine writing table by the window, a laptop, closed, a few bills, a notepad. I shone my flashlight at an angle across the notepad. The indentations from previous writing glowed in the slanted light. A phone number, a scrawled reminder, call Dr. A test results 2s, and a list, anniversary, trip, Aspen, talk future, timeline. The word was underscored. I photographed the notepad. Then, carefully, I opened the top desk drawer. Pens, paper clips, sticky notes. The second drawer held files. My breath hitched. One was labeled taxes, another lease, a third, a plain manila folder, had a post-it on it that simply said med. My hands, gloved in latex, were perfectly steady as I pulled it out. I opened it. On top was a bill from the concierge medical clinic. Detailed, listing charges for comprehensive genetic counseling and analysis and neurological consultation. Beneath it, a lab report from a company called GeneDx. Patient, Sophie and Mercer. DOB. Medical record number. And then, the result. Test, Huntington, HTT, gene. CAG repeat expansion analysis. Result, positive. CAG repeat number, 42. Interpretation, a CAG repeat number of 40 or more is associated with the development of Huntington's disease, HD. This is a positive result for the HD genetic mutation. Penetrance is complete. Genetic counseling is strongly recommended. The words swam on the page. Positive. Complete. It was one thing to suspect. It was another to hold the proof in your hands. A death sentence. Written in sterile, clinical language. A sentence she was hiding from the man she was using as her lifeboat. Beneath the lab report were printed articles about Huntington's disease. Symptoms. Progression. Treatment options. They were highlighted, notated in a frantic, looping script. Age of onset variable. 30s, 40s. Psychiatric symptoms often first. Chorea. Cognitive decline. No cure. And at the very bottom, a handwritten note. On a piece of lavender-scented stationery. Plan, secure commitment, ASAP. Prenup. Must be favorable. Need guaranteed support. Long-term care costs astronomical. Do not tell him. Not until after. Love is not enough. Security is everything. I stared at the note. The coldness of it. The calculation. Love is not enough. Security is everything. It was my own credo. Reflected back at me in the handwriting of the woman sleeping with my husband. The symmetry was grotesque. I heard a faint cough from the hallway. Oleg's signal. My time was up. Quickly, I laid the lab report and the handwritten note on the desk and photographed them. The flash off. The cameras click a silent snick in the quiet room. I took close-ups of the critical lines. Then, with meticulous care, I returned everything to its exact position in the folder. The folder to the drawer to its original alignment. I gave the room one last scan. My eyes fell on the nightstand. On it, a book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. I almost laughed. And next to it, a small, velvet ring box. I shouldn't have. I knew it was a risk. But I had to know. I opened it. Inside, nestled in white satin, was a ring. Not an engagement ring. A cocktail ring. A large, gaudy sapphire surrounded by diamonds. Tacky. Expensive. The kind of thing a man with new money and no taste would buy to placate a younger woman. A gift from Ethan. A promise of more. Perhaps. But not the promise. Not yet. I closed the box. Replaced it exactly. Then I slipped out of the bedroom. Through the living room. And tapped twice on the front door. Oleg was there. Pretending to adjust a smoke detector. He nodded toward the service elevator. I rode down alone. My tote bag heavy with the camera. Heavy with the truth. Back in my apartment. The wig and gloves disposed of. The camera's memory card safely backed up to an encrypted cloud drive and 2 separate hard drives. I finally let myself feel it. Not triumph. Not yet. It was something darker. More complex. A profound, weary understanding of the game we were all playing. Ethan, chasing lost youth. Sophie, fleeing a genetic doom. Me, fighting for the ruins of a life I'd thought was real. I had the weapon now. The ultimate piece of paper. Not just proof of an affair, but proof of a fundamental, life-altering deception. A lie of omission so vast it rendered every sweet word, every tender touch between them a calculated fraud. I printed 1 copy of the lab report and the handwritten note. I placed it in a fresh, plain folder. This was not for Meredith. This was not for the courts. This was for one man. For the look on his face when the story he thought he was living, the story of a powerful man reinvigorated by a young, vibrant lover, shattered into the truth. He was a mark, a bank account, a future nurse's fund. I poured a glass of water and stood at my window, looking out at the city. Somewhere out there, Ethan was probably in a conference room, or at a bar with Rothstein, strategizing how to protect his money, his reputation. Somewhere, Sophie was maybe buying a new dress, or planning a romantic weekend, ticking off the boxes on her timeline. And I was here, in the silent heart of the storm I had created, holding the piece of paper that would change everything. The conflict was no longer just between husband and wife. It was a 3-way collision of desperate needs, cold strategies, and the brutal truth that in the end, we were all just trying to survive. The only question was who would be left standing when the dust settled. The conference room at Rothstein, Glass Faber, was a monument to masculine anxiety disguised as power. Dark walnut paneling absorbed the light. Heavy leather chairs groaned under the weight of implication. And the air smelled of lemon polish and old money. It was a room designed to make people feel small, to remind them of the immovable institutions they were up against. I found it oddly comforting. Today, I was the immovable object. I sat beside Meredith Thorne, a study in contrast, where the room was dark and heavy. She was a blade of light in a cream-colored Alexander McQueen suit, her posture so perfect it seemed to defy gravity. I wore navy blue, a simple, expensive Roland Mouret dress that spoke of understated authority, not flashy wealth. My hair was smoothed back, my makeup minimal, my jewelry a single strand of pearls that had belonged to my grandmother. I looked like what I was supposed to be, the wronged wife. Dignified, unassailable. Inside, the cold diamond hummed. Across the vast, polished expanse of the table, Ethan sat flanked by David Rothstein. Ethan looked like hell. His tan had a sallow undertone. His custom suit hung slightly loose. And there were bruised shadows under his eyes that not even the room's forgiving light could hide. He'd been staying at the Yale Club. I knew from Roy's updates. Drinking too much and sleeping too little. The pressure was already working. He couldn't meet my gaze. His eyes darting from the legal pad in front of him to the ominous stack of folders Meredith had placed between us like a gauntlet. David Rothstein cleared his throat. The sound like gravel shifting. He was in his 60s. With the rumpled, lived-in face of a man who'd smoothed over 1,000 rich men's indiscretions. Meredith. Lila. Thank you for coming. I think we all want the same thing here. A swift, amicable resolution that allows everyone to move forward with dignity. Meredith offered a thin smile that didn't reach her eyes. Dignity left the building. David. The moment your client decided to fund his mistress's lifestyle with marital assets. But do go on. We're listening. Ethan flinched. Rothstein's jaw tightened. Now, Meredith. Let's not be hyperbolic. My client has acknowledged that this is a painful situation. He's here in good faith to reach a settlement that is fair to both parties. Good faith. Meredith repeated, as if tasting the words and finding them sour. She opened the top folder. Good faith doesn't involve the systematic diversion of funds from a marital partnership, and, I might add, from a client escrow account at Harwood Klein. into a shell LLC for the sole purpose of supporting an extramarital affair. Good faith doesn't involve leasing an apartment for one's mistress while one's wife pays the mortgage on the marital home. Let's not insult each other with euphemisms. David, we're here because your client committed gross financial misconduct and adultery. We're here to discuss the price of that misconduct. Rothstein held up a placating hand. The transfers to Prescott Holdings were ill-advised, I'll grant you. But they were loans. Meredith. To be repaid. And the apartment is a corporate lease. For client entertainment, oh. Please. I said, my voice cutting through the legalese. It was the first time I'd spoken. Both men looked at me. Startled. I kept my eyes on Ethan. Spare us the fiction. Ethan. We're way past that. The Lowell. Was that for client entertainment too? The Van Cleef bracelet. The trips to Napa. Were you tasting vineyards with a corporate client named Sophie? Ethan's face flushed a mottled red. Lila. This isn't the place. This is exactly the place. I said. My tone conversational. Almost pleasant. This is the only place left for us. So let's have some truth. For once. You emptied our joint savings to seed that LLC. You've been funneling money to her for months. You lied to me. You betrayed me. And you did it with our money. So let's talk about what that's going to cost you. Rothstein interjected, trying to regain control. Lila, no one is denying this is painful. But New York is an equitable distribution state. The fact of an affair, while regrettable, doesn't entitle you to everything. My client is prepared to be more than generous. He's offering you the apartment. Free and clear. A one-time lump sum payment of $2 million. And reasonable spousal support for a period of 5 years. That's a very fair offer. Given the length of the marriage and your own earning capacity. I didn't even blink. Meredith gave a soft, derisive snort. $2 million. David, that's an insult. The apartment has $3 million in equity. The value of Ethan's partnership interest, based on last year's profit share and projected growth, is north of $12 million. The hidden assets in Prescott Holdings exceed $800,000. Your offer doesn't even cover the theft, let alone the betrayal. She slid a single sheet of paper across the table. This is our offer. Rothstein put on his reading glasses, his lips moving silently as he scanned the document. His face grew steadily paler. He looked up, his eyes wide behind the lenses. This is outrageous. You can't be serious. I am deadly serious. Meredith said. The apartment. The Southampton house. 70% of all liquid assets, including the 401k and the investment portfolios. 100% of the assets in Prescott Holdings, as they are demonstrably the product of marital fund dissipation. A lump sum payment of $8 million, representing a share of future partnership earnings, to be paid over 3 years. And my client retains full ownership and control of her design business, which, I should add, your client has consistently undervalued and dismissed. Ethan finally found his voice. It was ragged, strained. $8 million. 70%. Lila, this is ruinous. You take everything I've worked for. I turned my head slowly to look at him. The anger I felt was so cold it was almost peaceful. No. Ethan. You took everything we worked for. You took our marriage, our trust, our future. You gave it to a girl half your age. I'm just reclaiming what's left of the material assets. Consider it a restocking fee. This is blackmail. He spat, half rising from his chair. Sit down. Ethan. Rothstein said sharply, pulling at his sleeve. He turned back to Meredith, his expression grim. You know as well as I do that no judge will award this. It's punitive. The adultery claim will get you some favorable distribution. Maybe 60-40. Not this. And the firm will never agree to a payout on future earnings. It's unprecedented. Then I guess we'll have to ask a judge, Meredith said calmly. And while we're in discovery, we'll be subpoenaing every email, every financial record from Harwood Klein related to Prescott Holdings. We'll be deposing your client's partners, asking them pointed questions about their knowledge of funds being shifted from client accounts. We'll be deposing Sophie Mercer, under oath. About the source of her income, her apartment, her jewelry. The New York Post loves a good lawyer and his lover story, especially when firm money is involved. I wonder how many of Harvard Klein's blue-chip clients will appreciate seeing their retainers mentioned in page 6. The blood drained completely from Ethan's face. He looked at his lawyer, a silent plea in his eyes. Rothstein removed his glasses and pinched the bridge of his nose. Meredith, for God's sake, there's no need for that kind of scorched earth tactic. We can come to a reasonable agreement. Something that doesn't destroy my client's career in the process. My client's life has already been destroyed, Meredith said, her voice like ice. She is under no obligation to protect the career of the man who destroyed it. The offer on the table is the reasonable agreement. It's the price of silence. It's the price of me not filing a complaint with the Bar Association about the misappropriation of client funds. Sign it. And this stays a private, unfortunate divorce. Fight it, and I will make it my mission to ensure Ethan never practices law in this state again. And I will enjoy every minute of it. The room was silent, thick with the threat. I could see the calculations racing behind Rothstein's eyes. The risk assessment, the damage control. Ethan just looked shattered, staring at the table as if it were the edge of a cliff. I need to confer with my client, Rothstein said, his voice heavy. Privately. Of course, Meredith said, rising gracefully. Lila and I will be in the lobby. You have 15 minutes. We left them there, in that oppressive room, in the sleek, modern lobby. Meredith allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. They're rattled. The mention of the Bar Association, that's the button. No firm can survive that scandal. They'll pay to make it go away. It's just a question of how much. I nodded, looking out at the rain-slicked streets. The diamond inside me felt heavier, sharper. They'll counter. Probably 55, 45, maybe 6-40 if we push. They'll fight the lump sum on future earnings. Let them fight. The threat of exposure is our leverage. He'll cave. He has to. She looked at me, her head tilted. You're very quiet. This is going well. Better than I expected. It's not over, I said. 15 minutes later, we were called back in. Ethan looked even worse. If possible. Rothstein's expression was grim. Resigned. My client cannot agree to these terms. Rothstein began, holding up a hand as Meredith opened her mouth. However, he is prepared to make a significantly improved offer. The apartment, 60% of the liquid assets, a one-time payment of $3 million, in lieu of alimony, the Southampton house. We keep Palm Beach, and we keep Prescott Holdings out of it. It's dissolved as of today. The funds are returned. Meredith smiled. A predator's smile. No. The apartment, 70% of liquid assets, the Southampton house, a lump sum of $6 million, payable over 2 years, and Prescott Holdings, and all its records, are transferred to my client, to dispose of as she sees fit. That is our final offer. Ethan slammed his hand on the table. Damn it. Lila, this is insane. You're taking everything. What do you want from me? Blood. I looked at him. My head tilted. No. Ethan. I don't want your blood. I want you to understand the value of what you threw away. I want you to feel it. In the one place you care about most, your bank account. And I want you to know exactly what you traded it for. His eyes were wild. Desperate. Traded it for. I fell in love. Is that a crime? She makes me happy. She's young. And vibrant. And she loves me for me. Not for what I can give her. The words hung in the air. Pathetic and hollow. I felt a surge of something that was almost pity. But colder. More contemptuous. He really believed it. He believed the story he'd sold himself. The powerful, world-weary man revived by the love of a good, simple girl. He'd swallowed the fantasy whole. It was time. I reached into my leather portfolio. The one that held my legal pad and pens. I didn't pull out a sheaf of financial documents. I pulled out a single, plain manila folder. I placed it on the table, exactly in the center, between Meredith's stack and Rothstein's notepad. She loves you for you. I repeated. My voice soft, almost musing. How refreshing. How utterly pure. Ethan stared at the folder, confused. Rothstein looked wary. What's this? Rothstein asked. Another set of demands. No, I said. This isn't for the settlement. This is context. Think of it as due diligence. Something you should have done. Ethan, before you bet your entire life on a feeling. I opened the folder. I didn't look at the contents. I kept my eyes on Ethan's face. I slid out the top sheet, the lab report from GeneDx, and turned it around so he could read it. Then, I placed the lavender-scented note beside it. The handwritten one. Security is everything. What is this? Ethan asked. His voice barely a whisper. He leaned forward, squinting at the small print. It's a genetic test result, I said. My tone flat. Clinical. For Sophie Mercer. Huntington gene. CAG repeat expansion analysis. It's the test for Huntington's disease. A progressive, fatal neurodegenerative disorder. No cure. Onset typically in one's 30s or 40s. Psychiatric symptoms first, mood swings, depression, anxiety, then the movement disorders, the chorea, the loss of cognitive function. It's a terrible way to go. And it's hereditary. A child of an affected parent has a 50% chance of inheriting it. Ethan's face went from pale to a sickly gray. He shook his head. A tiny, frantic movement. No. That's a lie. You faked this. This is a disgusting trick. The lab is real. The clinic is real. The billing records, which I also have, are real. She's been seeing a neurologist on the Upper East Side for over a year. She takes sertraline and clonazepam. For the anxiety. A common early symptom. I tapped the lavender note. And this is her handwriting. I checked it against a lease application she signed. Security is everything. She's not in love with you, Ethan. She's in love with your health insurance, your bank account, your ability to fund the long-term care facility she's statistically likely to need in 15 years. You're not her knight in shining armor. You're her retirement plan. No. He breathed. But the denial was weaker now. He was reading the lab report. His eyes darting over the medical jargon. Landing on the stark, capitalized word, positive. His hands began to tremble. She would have told me. She loves me. Did she ever talk about her family? Her father? Her mother's health? I pressed. Relentless. Did she ever seem unusually preoccupied with the future? With financial security? Did she ever ask about your will? Your life insurance? The firm's partnership benefits for spouses? I saw the flicker in his eyes. The memory of a conversation. A question that had seemed innocent at the time. What happens to a partner's share if they pass away? Ethan. Is there a survivor benefit? She's young. She's healthy. He stammered. But the conviction was gone. Replaced by a dawning, horrified comprehension. She's a time bomb, I said. The words falling into the silent room like stones. And you were so busy feeling young and alive. You never bothered to look at the timer. You were her escape plan, Ethan. Her soft landing. You were the solution to a problem you didn't even know existed. He stared at the paper. At the damning handwriting. His breathing grew ragged. Shallow. The color had completely left his face. He looked like a man who had just seen a ghost, his own ghost. The future he had so blithely chosen. A future of doctor's appointments. Of cognitive decline. Of being a caretaker for a woman whose love was a transaction. Whose body was a betrayer. A future of staggering medical bills. Of genetic guilt. Of a disease that stole everything and gave nothing back. It was more than anger on his face. It was revulsion. It was terror. It was the absolute, gut-wrenching horror of realizing that the fantasy he'd traded his life for was not just shallow, but catastrophically, tragically flawed. The disaster was complete. And it was written in the cold, clinical language of a lab report. David Rothstein had picked up the paper, scanning it with a lawyer's quick eyes. He looked from the report to Ethan's shattered expression, and his own face tightened with a kind of professional pity. He knew this changed everything. This wasn't just about money or pride anymore. This was about the fundamental narrative of the affair. And the narrative had just collapsed into dust. Ethan finally looked up at me. His eyes were wide, bloodshot, filled with a confusion so deep it bordered on despair. "You knew," he whispered. "All this time. You knew this." "I suspected," I said. "And it was almost the truth. I did the due diligence you were too besotted to do. While you were buying her bracelets and telling her she made you feel young, I was finding out what she really is. A very desperate, very clever young woman with a very big problem. And you, my dear husband, were her chosen solution." The silence in the room was absolute. The hum of the air conditioning seemed deafening. Ethan looked down at the report again. Then at the note. "Security is everything." A small, choked sound escaped his throat. A hybrid of a sob and a laugh. The disaster of his own making was no longer an abstract concept of losing money or face. It was a vivid, technicolor nightmare of a future spent watching a woman he thought he loved disintegrate, chained to her by law and by his own stupidity. He put his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking. It wasn't grief for me, or for our marriage. It was self-pity, pure and simple. The pity of a man who has finally seen the cliff's edge after he's already stepped off. Meredith let the moment hang, thick and suffocating. Before she spoke, her voice was cool, precise. "I think, under the circumstances, my client's settlement offer is more than generous. It represents a clean break, a chance for you to walk away from this situation without the burden of future obligations that could become quite significant and quite public. Imagine, Ethan, if this came out. The powerful lawyer, duped by a sick gold digger. The partners would eat you alive. Your clients would flee. Who would trust a man who can't even see a con when it's sleeping in his bed?" Ethan didn't look up. Rothstein slowly put the paper down. He looked old and tired. He knew the fight was over. The financial threat was one thing. This was nuclear. We need to discuss this," Rothstein said. But the fire was gone from his voice. "There's nothing to discuss," Meredith said, gathering her papers. She slid a fresh copy of our settlement offer across the table. "The terms are as stated. The apartment, 70%, Southampton. The 6 million, Prescott Holdings. We'll give you 48 hours to sign. After that, the offer is withdrawn. And we proceed with litigation and, if necessary, disclosure to the appropriate medical and professional bodies. I trust you can see the wisdom of a swift resolution." She stood. I stood with her. I looked at my husband one last time. A broken man slumped in a leather chair, staring at a piece of paper that had just obliterated his world. The anger was still there. A cold, hard stone in my chest. But there was no joy in this. Only a vast, hollow satisfaction. "You asked what I wanted, Ethan," I said, my voice quiet in the hushed room. "Now you know." We walked out, leaving the folder on the table, leaving the wreckage of his delusions behind us. In the elevator, Meredith let out a long, slow breath. "Well," she said, a note of genuine awe in her voice. That was effective. I didn't answer. I just stared at my reflection in the polished brass doors. My face a pale, composed mask. The woman looking back at me was a stranger. Ruthless, vengeful, triumphant, and utterly, completely alone. The silence in the car was thick. The kind that follows a detonation. The rain had started again. A steady, grey drizzle that blurred the city into an impressionist painting of taillights and wet pavement. Meredith's driver, a taciturn man named Henry, navigated the afternoon traffic with a funereal solemnity, as if he too could sense the fallout in the air. Meredith finally broke the quiet, not looking at me, her gaze fixed on the streaming window. That was a high-risk maneuver, Lila. Exceptionally high risk. It worked, I said, my voice sounding hollow to my own ears. The adrenaline was receding, leaving behind a strange, shaky numbness. "It worked today," she corrected, turning her flinty gaze on me. "In that room. But you introduced a live grenade into a negotiation." You have no control over where the shrapnel flies. Rothstein is a fixer. His job is to contain disasters for his clients. He will now be scrambling to contain that. He will be advising Ethan on damage control, on legal exposure, on how to use that information, or the threat of its illegal procurement, against us. The information is real. The method of obtaining it may not be. If they can prove you broke into her apartment, stole medical records, you could face criminal charges. It would invalidate everything. It would make you the villain, and him the victim of a deranged, law-breaking wife. The sympathy would swing violently in his direction. All our leverage, gone in an instant. The cold knot in my stomach tightened. I hadn't considered that. I'd been so focused on the strike, on seeing the look on his face. I hadn't thought about the aftermath. The legal chessboard. Oleg is discreet. He's more afraid of me exposing his side business than I am of him. Everyone has a price. Lila and Ethan, backed into this corner, will be willing to pay a very high price to find a chink in our armor. He will hire investigators. He will lean on Rothstein's connections. You need to be prepared for that. I looked out at the rain. What do you advise? We move fast. We get the signed agreement before he has time to regroup. To get angry instead of scared. To start thinking counteroffensive. The 48-hour deadline is critical. I'll have the final settlement papers drafted and sent to Rothstein by tonight. No more negotiating. Take it or leave it. The pressure has to be absolute. And if he doesn't sign, then we prepare for war. And you pray to whatever god you believe in that your Ukrainian friend has the discretion of a tomb. She paused. And you need to brace yourself. He will contact you. Not through me. He will try to reach you directly. He'll be emotional. Volatile. You cannot engage. Not a word. Do you understand? Any communication now is a potential trap. I nodded. The numbness was receding, replaced by a low-grade thrum of anxiety. The high of the confrontation was gone. The messy, dangerous reality was setting in. Meredith was right. My phone buzzed in my purse as Henry pulled up to my building. A number I didn't recognize. Then a text. Lila. It's Ethan. We need to talk. Please. Not through lawyers. Just us. I showed the screen to Meredith. She didn't even glance at it. Block it. Now. And if he shows up here, you do not let him in. You call building security. And you call me. I blocked the number. The act felt childish. Cowardly. But Meredith's warning echoed in my head. A trap. The apartment welcomed me with its profound, expensive silence. I poured a glass of wine. Not because I wanted it, but because it was something to do with my hands. I stood at the window, watching the storm-darkened park. The image of Ethan's face, that look of dawning, horrified comprehension, played on a loop behind my eyes. It was what I'd wanted, wasn't it? To make him see. To make him feel the magnitude of his error. So why did I feel so empty? My phone buzzed again. This time, it was the landline. The number was blocked. I let it ring, listening to the shrill sound echo in the empty space. It stopped, then started again. Insistent. A minute later, my doorman, Carlos, called on the intercom. Mrs. Prescott, I'm sorry to disturb you. There's a Ms. Sophie Mercer here. She says she needs to speak with you. Urgently. She's quite upset. My breath caught. This. I had not anticipated. Not so soon. And not here. My fortress was being breached. I thought of Meredith's warning. Do not engage. But this wasn't Ethan. This was her. The source. Curiosity. And a darker, more compelling urge, to see the other player in the flesh. To measure my enemy, ward with caution. Carlos, I'm not receiving visitors. Please ask her to leave. I tried. She's insisting. She says she's not leaving until she speaks with you. She's causing a bit of a scene in the lobby. A scene. Of course. The calculated hysterics of a cornered animal. I could picture it. The tears. The raised voice. The performance for an audience of doormen and neighbors. Letting it continue was more dangerous than ending it. If she was here, she was unhinged. An unhinged person with a secret was a liability. Better to contain it. Send her up. Carlos, I said, my voice calm. And please, log the visit. For security. Yes. I put the wine down. I didn't change out of my meeting clothes. I needed every advantage of posture and presentation. I was in my home. She was the intruder. I unlocked the door and left it slightly ajar, then walked to the center of the living room, turning to face the entrance. My arms folded loosely, a general awaiting the envoy of a defeated army. I heard the elevator ding. Quick, sharp footsteps on the parquet hallway. Then she was in the doorway. A splash of violent color against my neutral tones. She was soaked. Her auburn hair plastered to her head. Her makeup smeared in tragic, raccoon-like circles around her eyes. She wore a thin trench coat, belted tightly, and she was shaking, from cold, or rage, or fear. Probably all three. She didn't wait for an invitation. She pushed the door open and stepped inside, her eyes wild, scanning the room before landing on me. You. She spat, the word dripping with venom. Sophie, I said, my tone politely inquiring, as if she were a delivery person with a package. This is a surprise. You're wet. You're tracking water on my floor. The banality of the statement seemed to enrage her further. You evil bitch. What did you do? What did you show him? I didn't answer. I just looked at her, letting her see the absolute lack of fear, of anger, of any emotion at all in my face. He called me. She choked out, tears mixing with the rain on her cheeks. He was horrible. Screaming, asking me about a test, a disease. He accused me of using him. How dare you? How dare you spread lies about me? They're not lies. Sophie, I said quietly, I have the lab report from GeneDx. CAG repeat count of 42. I have your notes. Security is everything. It's quite a plan. I have to admire the thoroughness, if not the morality. All the color left her face. The performance faltered, the outraged innocence crumbling to reveal the raw terror underneath. She took a stumbling step back, as if I'd struck her. You had no right. That's private. That's my private medical information. You stole it. How I obtained it is irrelevant. The fact of it is not. You hid a life-altering, fatal genetic condition from my husband while you encouraged him to leave his marriage, all to secure a financial future for your inevitable decline. That's not a love story. Sophie, that's fraud. It's not like that. She shrieked, her voice breaking. You don't understand. You with your perfect life, your perfect apartment, your perfect husband, you have no idea what it's like. The fear. Every day. Waiting. Wondering if today is the day you twitch. Or forget a word, wondering if you've already started. I'm 24. I don't want to die like that. I don't want to be a burden on my parents. I deserve a chance. I deserve some security. Some happiness before it all goes to hell. The raw pain in her voice was real. It echoed in the high ceiling of my living room. For a fleeting second, I saw not the mistress, not the enemy, but a terrified girl staring into an abyss. The diamond in my chest didn't soften, but it refracted the light differently. Pity was a useless emotion, but understanding was a tool. I don't dispute that your situation is terrible, I said, my voice still calm, almost gentle. Truly. But your method of securing that happiness was to destroy my life. You targeted a married man. You exploited his vanity and his midlife crisis. You lied to him by omission about the single most important fact of your existence. You don't get to play the victim here. Sophie, you're a co-conspirator in your own tragedy. I love him. The declaration was a desperate, clawing thing. No, you don't. You love what he represents. A way out. A safe harbor. You wrote it down. Love is not enough. Security is everything. You were clear-eyed about it. At least with yourself. Now he is too. She wiped at her face with a sodden sleeve, her breath coming in ragged hitches. The hysterics were subsiding, replaced by a calculating desperation I recognized. It was my own reflection in a funhouse mirror. What do you want? She asked, her voice dropping to a whisper. Money. Is that it? I'll go away. I'll leave him alone. Just don't tell anyone else. Please. If this gets out, my family, my brother, this isn't about you. Sophie, I said. And it was the truth. This is between Ethan and me. You are a symptom. A particularly painful one. But a symptom nonetheless. What I want is for you to disappear. To take your timeline and your plans and get as far away from Ethan Prescott as possible. He'll come after me, she said, a fresh wave of terror in her eyes. For the money. The apartment is leased by Prescott Holdings, which will soon be an asset in my divorce. Consider yourself evicted. The jewelry, the clothes, consider them severance. A very generous severance for services rendered. If you're smart, you'll pack what you can carry and be on a plane to anywhere by tomorrow. Because when Ethan realizes he can't fight me, his anger will have to go somewhere. And you, my dear, are the closest, softest target. She understood. The fear was now pure, unadulterated. She was realizing that the life raft she'd so carefully boarded was not only sinking but was about to drag her under with it. He'll hurt me, she whispered. Then you should leave before he gets the chance. I took a step toward her. I didn't raise my voice. But understand this. If you ever contact me again, if you ever speak to anyone about this, if you so much as whisper my name in connection with your medical records, I will not be as circumspect. I will release everything. The lab report, the notes, the financial records, to the press, to your family, to every potential employer you ever have. Your life will be over before the disease even has a chance to start. Do you understand me? She nodded. A quick, jerky movement. Her eyes wide with terror. The predator in her was gone, leaving only prey. I understand. Good. Now get out of my home. She turned and fled. A sodden, pathetic figure. The door slamming shut behind her. The echo seemed to last forever. I stood perfectly still, listening to the beat of my own heart. The encounter had left me feeling strangely soiled. I walked to the bar and poured the glass of wine down the sink. I needed a clear head. My phone buzzed. This time, it was a text from an unknown number. But the area code was Greenwich. My father. Lila, your mother told me. Call me when you can. We need to talk. Not a request. A summons. The other front in this war was opening. I texted back, long day. Dad, can it wait until tomorrow? The response was immediate. No. It cannot. I called. He answered on the first ring. Lila. His voice was the one he used in boardrooms, cold, displeased, expecting compliance. Hi, Dad. Arthur Harwood just called me. He's apoplectic. He says you and your attorney threatening to blow up his firm with some nonsense about Ethan misusing client funds. He says you're making outrageous financial demands and wielding some kind of personal smear campaign. What in God's name are you doing? I took a deep breath. I'm getting a divorce. Dad, Ethan was cheating on me. He was also stealing from the firm. Or coming perilously close to it. To pay for his mistress. I'm ensuring I'm not left destitute because of his poor choices. Destitute. Don't be dramatic. You have your business. You'll be fine. But dragging the firm's name through the mud. Accusing Ethan of theft. That's not how we handle things. Lila. We are discreet. We make arrangements. We do not make spectacles of ourselves. Arthur is a friend. This is embarrassing. The old familiar ache bloomed in my chest, the ache of never being quite enough. Of always causing a ripple in the perfect pond of his world. I'm not making a spectacle. Dad. I'm protecting myself. Ethan made his choices. These are the consequences. Consequences are for other people. He snapped. Not for us. Not for the Harwoods. You will call Meredith Thorne and you will tell her to stand down. You will accept a reasonable settlement. I will talk to Arthur. We will make this go away quietly. Do you understand? The diamond in my chest turned to ice. No. Dad. I don't understand. He betrayed me. He humiliated me. He took what was ours and gave it to another woman. And you're worried about Arthur Harwood's feelings. About discretion. Where is your discretion for me? Your daughter. There was a long silence. When he spoke again, his voice was lower. Harder. This is not about feelings. Lila. This is about the real world. Ethan is a partner at a firm that does business with my company. Your actions have repercussions beyond your wounded pride. You are jeopardizing relationships that took decades to build. You will stop. Now. It was the final brick in the wall. The last vestige of the old world. The world where I was Lila Prescott, dutiful wife and daughter, crumbled to dust. I was someone else now. Someone he didn't know. I'm sorry you feel that way, Dad, I said, my voice devoid of all emotion. But this is my divorce. My life. I will handle it as I see fit. If Arthur Harwood has a problem, he can take it up with my lawyer. Good night. I hung up before he could respond. My hand was trembling. I placed the phone carefully on the counter. The isolation was now complete. No husband. No parents. Only Meredith. And she was a mercenary. Only the cold, hard purpose I had forged for myself. The phone rang again almost instantly. I assumed it was my father. I looked at the screen. It was Ethan. Calling from a new number. He was persistent. Part of me wanted to ignore it. The smarter part. The part that was learning. Knew that a desperate man was an unpredictable man. I needed to know what he was thinking. I answered. But said nothing. Lila. His voice was a wreck. Hoarse. Thick with what sounded like tears or drink. Probably both. Lila. Please. Just talk to me. I remained silent. I'm at the Yale Club. I'm losing my mind. What you showed me. Sophie, she just left here. She was hysterical. She said you threatened her. Is it true? Is it really true? I didn't confirm or deny. I just let him talk. She admitted it. Lila. She didn't say the words. But she cried. She said she was scared. She said she was sorry. Oh, God. A ragged sob tore from his throat. How could I be so stupid? How could I not see it? All this time. I thought she was this fresh, innocent thing, and she was just calculating, using me. And I threw you away. I threw use away. For a lie. A sick, twisted lie. The self-pity was nauseating. He wasn't sorry for hurting me. He was sorry for being made a fool. Sorry that his grand romance was tawdry and tragic. The diamond in my chest was unmoved. I'll do it. He blurted out. His words slurring slightly. The settlement. Your terms. I'll sign. Just make it stop. Make her go away. Promise me you won't tell anyone. About the disease. Promise me. Lila. For the sake of what we had. Don't destroy me completely. There it was. The capitulation. Not born of remorse. But of terror and disgust. The financial ruin was preferable to the social and emotional ruin of being tied to Sophie's tragedy. He was choosing the clean break. The one that only cost money. His vanity had a price. And I had just named it. The papers will be at Rothstein's office by 10 a.m. tomorrow. I said. My first words to him. Sign them. Have Rothstein messenger them to Meredith. Once they're filed with the court. And once the first transfer is made. The matter is closed. I have no interest in your personal life going forward. Thank you. He whispered. The sound wet and broken. Lila. I am sorry. For everything. You didn't deserve this. It was the closest he would ever come to a real apology. It meant nothing. Goodbye. Ethan. I hung up. This time. I powered off the phone completely. The silence of the apartment descended once more. But it was different now. It was the silence of a battlefield after the ceasefire. The guns were still. The smoke was clearing. The terms of surrender were being written. I walked to the window. The rain had stopped. The clouds were breaking. And a sliver of moon cast a cold, silver light on the wet streets below. The negotiation was over. I had won. I had gotten everything I asked for. And more. I had broken him. And I had broken her. So why did the victory taste of ash and loneliness? I knew the answer. Because in the process of dismantling their lie, I had dismantled parts of myself. The part that could trust. The part that believed in love. Or even in basic decency. The part that had a family. I was now a woman who hired private investigators. who bribed superintendents, who wielded medical tragedies as weapons, who stared down her own father without flinching. I was the villain in someone else's story, probably in several stories, but I was the one still standing. I was the one with the keys to the apartment, the deed to the house, the numbers in the bank account. I was the one who had rewritten the ending. I turned away from the window, from the cold moonlight. The war wasn't over. There were papers to sign, money to move, a new life to somehow build from the ruins. But the pivotal battle, the one for his soul and for my future, was done. I had survived, and in the world I now inhabited, survival was the only victory that mattered. 14 months later, the air in Soho House's rooftop bar tasted of expensive perfume and deferred dreams. Below, the meatpacking district pulsed with a frenetic, hollow energy. I swirled the ice in my gin and tonic. The clink a solitary sound in the buzz of conversation. Beside me, Meredith Thorne sipped a mineral water, her sharp eyes scanning the room, forever assessing. "You're a ghost at this feast, Lila," she observed, not unkindly. "The design studio is a success. The apartment is a showpiece. The settlement is final. And the last payment cleared last week. You won. Why do you look like you're attending your own wake?" I offered a thin smile. "Is this your version of a pep talk?" "It's an observation. Most of my clients, at this stage, are in St. Bart's with a 25-year-old tennis instructor. You're here, with me, on a Tuesday night." She wasn't wrong. The victory was complete. Materially, the apartment on Fifth Avenue was mine, renovated and starkly beautiful, a reflection of the woman I'd become. The design studio, Lila Prescott Interiors, had a waiting list, fueled as much by the notoriety of my divorce as by my talent. The money was in the bank, a number so large it felt abstract. I'd won, and the silence that followed was deafening. "I heard from David Rothstein," Meredith said, changing tack. "Ethan was let go from Harwood Klein. Not fired. A mutual separation. The story is his pursuing other opportunities. The reality is, the firm quietly audited his accounts after our settlement. They found discrepancies, not enough for criminal charges, but enough to make him a liability. He's at a small insurance defense firm in White Plains now. A significant demotion." I felt nothing. Not a flicker of satisfaction. White Plains, a commuter town, a beige office park. It was a fate worse than prison for a man like Ethan. And Sophie. Meredith's lips tightened. Gone. A forwarding address in Scottsdale, Arizona. Living with a relative, I'm told. Working retail. The apartment on 78th was cleared out overnight. She left no trace. She paused. "You showed remarkable restraint. You know, not leaking the medical information. It was the smart play. The cleaner play. It wasn't restraint." I said truthfully. It was part of the deal. His signature for my silence. A transaction. I'd held up my end. The file was encrypted, stored in a digital vault. A sword left in its sheath. Nevertheless, she finished her water. The story, as it exists in our social ecosystem, is that Ethan had a tawdry, midlife crisis affair with a social climbing assistant. You, the elegant, long-suffering wife, emerged with dignity and a significant portion of the marital assets. You are a cautionary tale for cheating husbands and a patron saint for wronged wives. It's a good story. You should lean into it. It's a lie, I said softly, looking out at the glittering web of the Queensboro Bridge. All the best stories are, Meredith replied, standing. My advice: buy a puppy, or a lover, something to force you out of that magnificent, empty fortress of yours. Living well isn't just the best revenge, Lila. Sometimes, it's the only thing left. She left me with the bill, a habit of hers. I paid, the money meaningless. As I waited for the valet, I felt a familiar, itchy sense of being watched. I turned, scanning the crowd, and I saw him, Ethan. He was at the far end of the bar, half hidden in shadow. He was alone. The sight was a physical shock. 14 months had not been kind. The golden tan was gone. replaced by a pallor that spoke of fluorescent lights and cheap liquor. His suit was off the rack, ill-fitting. He'd lost weight. But it wasn't healthy. It was the gauntness of stress and neglect. He was staring into a glass of amber liquid, his shoulders hunched, the very picture of a ruined man. Our eyes met across the crowded room. His widened, a flash of shock, then shame, then a slow dawning, pathetic hope. He began to stand, to weave his way toward me. My valet arrived. Your car, Ms. Prescott. I didn't hesitate. I slipped into the waiting town car without a backward glance. As we pulled away, I saw him stumble out onto the curb, watching my taillights disappear. A forgotten ghost on the sidewalk. The image stayed with me all the way home. Not as a trophy, but as a memento mori. A reminder of what revenge truly consumed. 1 week later, the gallery opening in Chelsea was for a young sculptor I'd mentored. It was my first foray back into the social scene as a single woman. An unmarried woman. The air was thick with unspoken questions and performative support. I wore black. A simple sheath that cost more than most people's cars. And a smile that felt carved from wood. Lila, darling, you look radiant. Freedom agrees with you. Air kisses from women whose husbands I now suspected. So brave. The way you handled everything. Such dignity. Subtext, tell us the juicy bits. I moved through the crowd. A diplomat without a country. And then, I saw him again. Ethan. He was with a client. I assumed, a balding man in a bad suit. He was playing the part of the attentive junior partner. Laughing too loudly at a lame joke. He saw me. The performance faltered. His smile died. He excused himself and, to my horror, started walking toward me. There was no escape without causing a scene. And causing a scene was the one thing I couldn't afford. So I stood my ground. My wooden smile firmly in place. Lila, he said, stopping a few feet away. He smelled of stale coffee and despair. You look, well, Ethan. I nodded, my tone that of a distant acquaintance. I didn't know you were interested in contemporary sculpture. I'm not. Client. He shoved his hands in his pockets. A nervous, boyish gesture that was once charming, now just sad. He looked around, lowered his voice. I saw you. Last week. At Soho House. You left before I could. I had an appointment. I lied smoothly. He nodded, swallowing. I wanted to thank you. For your discretion. About everything. It was part of our agreement. I know. But still. He took a shaky breath. I'm in a program. For the drinking. And I'm seeing someone. A therapist. I'm trying. Lila. I'm really trying to be better. The apology I'd waited for. In this mangled, public form. It wasn't for me. It was for him. A step in his 12-step program. I felt a surge of contempt so pure it cleaned. I'm glad to hear that. Ethan. Truly. I hope it brings you peace. He searched my face. Looking for something. Forgiveness. Pity. A crack in the ice. He found nothing. His shoulders slumped. You were right. You know. About all of it. I was a fool. I got what I deserved. For a moment, the mask of the ruined man slipped. And I saw genuine, unvarnished regret. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. No. I said, surprising myself. The words were quiet. For his ears only. You didn't deserve White Plains. You didn't deserve the drinking. What you did to me. You deserved. The rest, that's just life being life. You got mercy. Ethan. I could have been so much crueler. He flinched as if struck. The truth of it, the absolute cold finality of it, dawned in his eyes. I hadn't just beaten him. I had judged him. And found him worthy of a punishment just short of annihilation. And in that moment, he understood the full measure of what he had lost. Not just the money, or the apartment, or the career. He had lost the woman who had once loved him. And in her place stood a stranger capable of a calculated, surgical mercy that was more terrifying than any rage. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He just gave a slow, broken nod, turned, and walked away. disappearing into the crowd. A shell of the man who had once confessed his love for another woman over a 10-year anniversary dinner. I didn't watch him go. I turned back to the grotesque, beautiful metal sculpture in the center of the room. It was all sharp, twisted angles, reflecting the fractured light and the fractured people around it. I saw my own reflection, distorted in the polished steel, the elegant dress, the perfect hair, the empty eyes. Meredith was wrong. This wasn't a good story. It was no story at all. It was just an ending. Quiet, cold, and utterly, completely mine. 18 months post-divorce, the Pacific Ocean was a vast, breathing sheet of hammered silver under the dawn sky. I stood on the deck of the rented Malibu house, a sweater pulled tight against the California chill, coffee warming my hands. The crash of the surf was a constant, rhythmic erasure. Here, 3,000 miles from the canyons of Manhattan, the silence felt different. It wasn't the hollow quiet of my apartment. It was spacious, full of salt and wind and possibility. Or at least, the absence of ghosts. The move had been Meredith's idea, delivered in her typical, unsentimental style. New York is an archive for you now, Lila. Every restaurant, every street corner. It's a monument to a life that's over. You've won the war. Stop living in the trenches. Go build a new country. So I had. Lila Prescott Interiors West was now a sleek storefront in Pacific Palisades. The clientele was different, more tech money, less old wealth, a preference for organic minimalism over Park Avenue grandeur, but the work was the same, creating beautiful, empty spaces for people to fill with their own dramas. I was good at it. I was the best at building frames for other people's lives. My phone buzzed on the teak table. A calendar notification. Lunch. Daniel, 1 p.m. Jeffries. Daniel Wright. An architect I'd met 2 months ago at a sustainability conference. He was a different species from the men in my past. Late 40s. With sun-bleached streaks in his sandy hair and calloused hands that sketched beautiful, environmentally sensitive structures. He was divorced, amicably, with 2 teenagers he adored. He talked about watershed management and passive heating with a passion Ethan had reserved for bond yields. He was kind. He was steady. He was interested. And I was frozen. Our previous dates played in my mind like films with the sound off. Charming conversations about coastal erosion. A lingering goodnight kiss at my door that had left me feeling nothing but a vague, panicky claustrophobia. His texts, friendly and consistent, felt like obligations. The trust wasn't just broken. The mechanism for building it seemed to have been surgically removed. Ethan's betrayal hadn't just taken my marriage. It had taken my faith in the very architecture of intimacy. How could you believe in a foundation when you'd seen how easily the bedrock could be made of lies? The house in Malibu was a perfect example. I'd leased it for 6 months. It was stunning. All glass and bleached wood, open to the sea. I'd done nothing to it. Not a new throw pillow. Not a piece of art. It was a beautiful shell. I was a beautiful shell. We were a perfect match. Later, at Jeffries, perched above the ocean, Daniel's smile was easy. You look like you're plotting the structural integrity of that pelican, he said, nodding toward the bird gliding on the thermals. I forced a smile. Just thinking about load-bearing walls. The bane of my existence and my inspiration, he said, sipping his iced tea. So, I have a proposition. Not a work one. A friend has a cabin in Big Sur. He's lending it to me next weekend. No cell service. Just redwoods, a creek, and a very temperamental wood stove. I'd love for you to come. The invitation was a door swinging open. A weekend. Isolated. Intimate. My heart gave a single, hard thud of pure, animal fear. Trap. A voice whispered. The voice that had become my most trusted advisor. Commitment. Vulnerability. A wood stove is just a different kind of lock. I'd love to. Daniel. I heard myself say. The social automaton taking over. But I'm swamped. A new client in Bel Air. A complete gut renovation. It's a nightmare timeline. The lie was smooth. Effortless. His smile didn't falter. But his eyes, a warm, cognac brown, deepened with something that looked like understanding. Not disappointment. Understanding. It was worse. Another time. Then, he said gently. The meal continued. The conversation flowing. But a chasm had opened between us. He was on one side. In the land of the living. Offering connection. I was on the other. In my fortress of solitude. Polishing my weapons out of habit. After lunch, he walked me to my car. Instead of leaning in for a kiss, he took my hand, his thumb brushing over my knuckles. Lila, he said, his voice low. Can I say something? Without you hiring that terrifying lawyer of yours to sue me. A faint, real smile touched my lips. I'll consider it. You're the most remarkable woman I've met in a long time. You're brilliant. You're talented. You're strong as hell. But it's like you're living in a museum. Everything is perfectly curated, perfectly protected, and no one's allowed to touch anything. I'm not asking to redecorate. I'm just asking if I can come in from the vestibule. The accuracy of it stole my breath. He saw it. He saw me, the current, frozen version. The kindness in his face was unbearable. It offered no threat, only a choice. A terrifying, impossible choice. Daniel. The words clogged in my throat. I'm broken. I'm scared. The last man I let in used the blueprints to destroy the house. He squeezed my hand and let go. You don't have to say anything. Just think about the cabin. The offer stands. But Lila, you can't live in the vestibule forever. At some point, you have to decide if you're going to lock the door and throw away the key, or if you're going to take a chance and walk into the next room, even if you're not sure what's in there. He gave me one last, gentle look, got into his own car, and drove away. I sat in my silent, expensive SUV, watching the ocean, feeling more alone than I had in the hollow apartment on Fifth Avenue. That night, I couldn't sleep. The Malibu house, for all its openness, felt like a gilded cage. I wandered into the empty living room. A single banker's box sat in the corner. The last artifact I hadn't been able to discard or put in storage. The archive of the war. I knelt and opened it. Not the financial documents, those were with my accountant. This was the personal detritus. A photo of Ethan and me, young and laughing, on a sailboat in Maine. Our wedding invitation. The ink faded. A love note he'd written on a hotel notepad during a rainstorm in Paris. And at the very bottom, a slim, sealed envelope. I knew what it was without opening it. A copy of the genetic test. Sophie's lavender-scented note. The original weapons. I hadn't looked at them since the day in Rothstein's office. I held the envelope now. It felt heavy with spent malice. This was the heart of the vestibule. This proof. This power. This cold triumph. It was the reason I couldn't trust a kind architect with a cabin in Big Sur. Because trusting meant disarming. And disarming meant the possibility of being hurt like that again. I had built my entire new identity on being the one who saw the trap. Who wielded the scalpel. Who won. But what had I won? A view. A bank account. A business. And this profound, echoing loneliness that not even the crash of the Pacific could fill. Daniel's words echoed. Lock the door and throw away the key. I could do that. I could be the elegant, enigmatic, independently wealthy divorcee. A fixture on the charity circuit. A mentor to young designers. Forever admired and forever untouched. It was a valid life. A safe life. Or walk into the next room. With trembling hands. I didn't open the envelope. I carried it to the sleek gas fireplace. I turned the knob. A blue flame whispered to life. I held the envelope over it. The rational part of my brain. The part that had orchestrated the last 2 years. Screamed. This is evidence. This is power. This is your insurance policy, but insurance against what? A future that had already happened. A ghost who was in Arizona. A ruined man in White Plains. The past wasn't a room I could live in. It was a country I had scorched. Holding onto the maps of the burned land was keeping me in the ashes. I let go. The envelope caught. The edges curling black. Then orange. The flame consumed the paper hungrily. The medical secrets and the desperate plans turning to fragile, weightless black flakes that rose up the flue. The physical proof of my victory, of my pain, of my vengeance, gone in less than a minute. A small pile of grey ash on the ceramic log was all that remained. I felt no catharsis, no great weight lifting, just a simple, stark emptiness, as if I had removed a tumor I'd grown accustomed to carrying. I went back to the deck. The dawn was breaking again, painting the sky in watercolor streaks of pink and gold. The ocean was endless. My phone, sitting on the table, lit up. A text, not from Daniel, from my assistant, about the Bel Air client's indecision on marble versus quartzite. And then, a second later, another text. This one from Daniel. No words, just a single photo. A rustic, beautiful cabin nestled among towering redwoods, a wisp of smoke curling from its chimney. The caption, the vestibule has a nice view, but the living room has a fireplace. I stared at the photo, then at the vast, open horizon. The door wasn't just unlocked. It was gone. I had burned it for fuel. The only thing left was to decide where to walk. I picked up the phone. My finger hovered over the screen. The old fear, cold and familiar, coiled in my stomach. Then I looked at the last of the ash being swept away by the sea breeze from the deck. I typed 3 words. I'll bring matches. I didn't hit send immediately. I held the phone, feeling the wild, terrifying beat of my own heart, not the steady, frozen thump of survival, but the chaotic, alive rhythm of someone standing on a cliff edge, choosing not to look down, but out. I took a deep breath of the salt air, and let my thumb fall. 3 months later, redwoods don't whisper. They speak in a language of deep, resonant silences and groaning wood. A sound felt in the bones more than heard. I sat on the porch of the Big Sur cabin, a wool blanket around my shoulders, and listened. For 3 days, there had been no cell service, no client emails, no hum of the city, no echo of the past. There was only the scent of damp earth and pine, the distant rush of the creek, and Daniel, moving quietly inside, building a fire against the evening chill. The cabin was his design. Of course, not showy, but profoundly intelligent. It was nestled into the hillside, all reclaimed timber and glass, drawing light and heat from the environment, giving shelter without imposing. It felt like an extension of the forest. It felt safe. That was the most surprising thing. In this remote place, with a man I was still learning, I felt safer than I had in my own steel and glass fortress overlooking the park. The weekend had been a series of small surrenders, letting him teach me how to prime the temperamental water pump, sitting in comfortable silence as we read by firelight. The first night, when a branch had scraped against the roof like a skeletal hand, I hadn't flinched into defensive isolation. I'd simply said, "That's ominous." And he'd laughed. A warm sound that filled the small space. The intimacy wasn't in grand declarations, but in the sharing of a bar of chocolate, in the unspoken agreement on when to talk and when to be still. It was the stillness that was the greatest revelation. With Ethan, stillness had been a vacuum to be filled, with plans, with gossip, with the next acquisition. Here, the stillness was a presence. It was in that stillness that I finally began to hear myself again. Not Lila the Avenger, or Lila the divorcee, or Lila the designer, just Lila, a woman who liked strong coffee, who was secretly afraid of bears, who could be moved to tears by the way the morning fog clung to the tops of these ancient trees. On the second day, we'd hike to a ridge overlooking the Pacific. The wind whipped our words away, leaving only the roaring edge of the continent. Daniel had pointed out a red-tailed hawk riding the thermals, and for a moment, I'd seen not a bird, but a kind of freedom, not from something, but into something. A purposeful, soaring trajectory. "What are you thinking?" he'd asked, his voice soft against the wind. I'd almost given the polished, deflective answer, about the line of the coast, about the client in Bel Air. Instead, I'd said, "I'm thinking I don't know who I am when I'm not fighting a war." He'd just nodded, as if I'd commented on the weather. "Maybe that's the point of coming here. to find out. Now, on our last evening, the fire crackled to life inside. Daniel came out, handing me a mug of tea, and sat beside me on the rough-hewn bench, not touching me, just sharing the space and the view. "Thank you," I said, the words inadequate. "For this. For your patience." "It's not patience," he said, staring out at the darkening grove. "It's curiosity. I want to see who you become when you're not looking over your shoulder. What if you don't like her?" He finally looked at me, the firelight from the doorway catching the flecks of gold in his eyes. "Then I'll have had the privilege of meeting her. And you'll know her a little better too. That's not a loss, Lila. That's a win." It was a philosophy so foreign to my recent life, where every interaction was a calculated gain or loss, a strategic move on a board. This was different. This was exploration. We sat until the stars punched through the velvet black of the sky, a dizzying spill of diamonds impossible to see from the city. I felt small, but not insignificant, a part of something vast and old and beautifully indifferent. Back in Malibu, the world rushed in, but its volume was turned down. The Bel Air client chose courtside. The business thrived. I began, tentatively, to make the rental house a home. Not a showpiece, but a home. I bought a ridiculously ugly, supremely comfortable armchair at a flea market. I hung a print I loved, not one that matched the decor. I left a book face down on the coffee table. Small acts of peaceful occupation. Daniel and I fell into an easy rhythm. Weekend hikes. Dinners where we talked about everything and nothing. He met my few California friends. I met his kind, surfer-philosopher kids, who treated me with a cheerful, uncomplicated acceptance that was a balm. It was slow. It was real. The ghost of Ethan, the specter of betrayal, still flickered at the edge of my vision sometimes, a tightening in my chest when Daniel was late. A moment of cold suspicion when he mentioned a female client. But the feeling no longer had a home. It was a refugee from a dead country, and I was learning not to grant it asylum. One afternoon, 6 months after the cabin, I was reviewing fabric samples when my assistant buzzed. "A delivery for you, Lila." No card. It was a long, narrow white box. Not from a florist. From a jeweler. My heart, that traitorous organ, gave a sickening lurch. A ring. It's too soon. It's a demand. A trap. The old fear rose, icy and familiar. I opened the box with stiff fingers. Inside, nestled on velvet, wasn't a ring. It was a key. A single, old-fashioned, skeleton key. Attached to it was a small tag with Daniel's precise architect's handwriting. "Not for a lock. For the door you've already walked through. A souvenir. To remind you that you have the key. And you can always change the locks. But you don't have to." I started to cry. Not the silent, frozen tears of the last 2 years, but deep, shaking, helpless sobs that came from a place of release. He understood. He understood the fortress, the vestibule, the terror of permanent architecture. He wasn't offering a new cage. He was acknowledging my ownership of my own doors. The gift was a testament to trust, not a demand for it. That evening, I drove to his house in Topanga Canyon. He was on the deck, sketching. I walked up and placed the key on his drawing table. "I don't need a souvenir," I said, my voice rough. "I know I have the key." He looked at it, then at me, waiting. "But I'd like to leave this one here, with you, in case I ever forget where I put mine." A slow smile spread across his face, the kind that reached his eyes and lit them from within. He didn't sweep me into a dramatic embrace. He simply picked up the key, walked to the back door of his house, a solid, hand-carved thing, and hung it on a small brass hook beside the frame. It looked like it had always belonged there. "It'll be here," he said. 1 year after Big Sur, the gala for the Los Angeles Conservancy was held at a decaying Art Deco theater we'd helped save. I wore emerald green, a color I'd avoided for years. Daniel wore a tuxedo that fit him with unself-conscious ease. We weren't the most glamorous couple there, but as we moved through the crowd, I felt a grounded sense of belonging I'd never known. I was no longer defined by what had been done to me, but by what I was building. During a quiet moment on a balcony overlooking the restored auditorium, Daniel slipped his hand into mine. "You're different," he said, "from the woman I met at that conference. You're lighter." "I'm not lighter," I said, leaning into his shoulder. "The weight's just distributed differently. I'm carrying my own baggage now, not someone else's." He kissed my temple. "Good." Later that night, back at my Malibu house, the moon laid a path of silver on the black water. We stood on the deck, the sounds of the party replaced by the eternal surf. I thought of the other ocean, the Atlantic, visible from my old prison of an apartment. I thought of the ashes of a medical report carried away on a different wind. I thought of a key on a hook in Topanga. "What are you thinking?" Daniel asked, echoing the question from the ridge. I looked out at the endless, dark horizon, then at him. The past was a closed book. The future was an unwritten one. But the present, this moment, with the salt air and this good man's hand in mine, was a country I was finally learning to inhabit. "I'm thinking," I said, a real, easy smile spreading across my face for what felt like the first time in forever, "that I have no idea what happens next." I squeezed his hand. "And for once, that feels absolutely perfect." The end.